The first time I sent money home, it wasn't much, just a small transfer to help my parents cover a few unexpected bills. I remember sitting in my tiny apartment, staring at the confirmation message on my phone, feeling proud. It felt like I was finally becoming someone responsible, someone who could give back to the family that raised me. I didn't know that small act would turn into a lifelong expectation. Months passed, then years. My career slowly grew, and so did the amount I sent. What started as help became a routine, $1 to $800 every month like clockwork. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was duty. I told myself that a good son or daughter doesn't measure what they give. At first, my family appreciated it. My mother would call and say, "May God bless you, you are our strength." My father would speak with pride when relatives visited. Even my sister-in-law, who barely spoke to me directly, once said, "We are lucky to have you." Those words were enough to keep me going. But slowly, something changed. It wasn't sudden, it never is. The gratitude became expectation. The appreciation became silence. The calls I used to receive just to check on me started shrinking. When I called, conversations became shorter, distracted, like I was interrupting something important. Still, I sent the money, even when I was tired, even when I had to delay my own plans, even when I started skipping things I needed, just to make sure the $1 to $800 was never late. Because, in my mind, stopping meant abandoning them. My parents never demanded directly. They didn't have to. The expectation was already built into every conversation, every small sigh, every mention of rising expenses. It became unspoken truth. I was the provider now. My sister-in-law slowly took over household decisions. Renovations were done. New furniture appeared in pictures they sent me. I remember once seeing a brand new refrigerator in the background of a video call. I asked about it, smiling. "Oh, it was needed," she said casually. "The old one was outdated." No one asked if I was okay with it. No one asked if I could afford it. It was assumed I would continue, as always, and I did. I convinced myself it was fine. That families support each other, that success is meaningless if it isn't shared. But behind my reassurance, something inside me began to wear down. I started noticing how my life felt smaller, while theirs seemed to expand. They had gatherings. I had overtime shifts. They had comfort. I had responsibility. They had each other. I had a phone and a monthly transfer. Still, I stayed silent. Because love, I believed, meant sacrifice without complaint. There were moments I wanted to say something. Moments when I hesitated before sending the money, fingers hovering over the screen. But then I would imagine their lives depending on it. My father's aging health, my mother's quiet worries, the family image I was supposed to uphold, so I sent it. Every month, without fail, even when I had emergencies of my own, I adjusted. Even when I felt unseen, I stayed consistent. I became reliable in the most invisible way possible. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked if I was saving anything. No one asked if I ever needed help. I told myself it didn't matter, but deep down, I began to feel like a machine. A source of income rather than a person. A name attached to an obligation. Still, I didn't stop, because I thought loyalty would eventually come back to me. I thought one day they would notice the weight I carried. I thought one day they would say, "You've done enough, now let us take care of you." That day never came. Instead, the expectations only grew quieter, heavier, more permanent. It was no longer helping the family. It was simply what I do, and I accepted it. Until one day, life itself decided to change everything. But at that time, I didn't know that the very foundation I was supporting so faithfully was built on silence, not gratitude. I only knew one thing. Every month, $1 to $800 left my account, and my family's life continued comfortably. And I called that love. By the time I reached the middle years of this routine, I stopped remembering what it felt like to not send money home. It had become as natural as paying rent or breathing, automatic, unquestioned, expected. But something inside me was starting to shift, even if I refused to admit it out loud. It began with small things, a missed call that was never returned, a message left unseen for hours then days. A conversation that used to last 20 minutes now ending in less than 5. Whenever I tried to bring up my own life, my stress, my work pressure, my loneliness, the topic would gently drift back to home expenses or household updates. It was subtle, but it was always redirected. I told myself they were busy, that life was hard, that families don't always express emotions openly. So I kept giving. My sister-in-law became more present in family matters than I ever remembered. Her voice started appearing in decisions that used to belong to my parents. Renovation plans, school fees, household upgrades, everything seemed to pass through her approval first. Once I noticed a new sofa during a video call. It was expensive, looking modern, clearly not something urgent. I smiled and asked casually, "Looks new. Did you replace the old one?" My mother hesitated before answering. My sister-in-law quickly jumped in. "It was necessary," she said. "The old one was too worn out. You wouldn't want guests thinking we don't maintain our home properly." There was a slight emphasis on the word we, as if I was included in a decision I was never part of. I nodded even though something inside me felt uncomfortable. Not anger, not yet, just distance, a growing sense that I was watching a life I was funding, but not living. Still, every month, I sent the $2,800, no delay, no question, even when my own expenses started stacking up. Even when I postponed buying things I actually needed. Even when I started skipping meals outside just to make sure nothing interrupted the transfer. Because in my mind I wasn't supporting them. I was keeping the family together, at least that's what I told myself. But the emotional return was fading. When I visited once after a long time, I noticed something I couldn't ignore. The house felt different, not physically but emotionally. There was laughter, yes, but not directed toward me. Conversations flowed around me, not with me. I sat in the living room while everyone moved in and out like I was part of the furniture, present, but not central. My father spoke about his health briefly, then moved on to discussing neighborhood news. My mother asked about my work, but before I could answer properly, she got distracted by something in the kitchen. And my sister-in-law, she barely acknowledged me directly unless it was about something practical. Yet when I sent money, I was the blessing. When I was present, I was just there. It didn't make sense at first, or maybe it did, and I just didn't want to see it. One night during that visit, I overheard a conversation from the hallway. My sister-in-law was talking to my mother. "She always sends it on time," she said casually, almost like she was discussing a utility bill. "We shouldn't worry too much. She's responsible." My mother responded softly, "Yes, we are lucky. Lucky." The word echoed in my mind longer than I expected. Not loved, not missed, not appreciated, just lucky. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about how something so consistent could still feel so empty. I started noticing patterns I had ignored before. No one asked how I was managing financially. No one checked if I was saving anything. No one inquired about my future plans. The only consistent question was indirect. "When will you send it?" Even if it wasn't spoken, it was always there. A quiet expectation hanging in the background of every interaction. I tried to convince myself it was normal. That responsibility doesn't always come with emotional rewards. That being the strong one means carrying weight silently. But the truth was harder to accept. I wasn't being relied on. I was being depended on without boundaries. And dependency without appreciation slowly turns into entitlement. Still, I stayed, because leaving felt like betrayal. And I wasn't ready to be the villain in my own family story. So I ignored the discomfort. I ignored the silence between messages. I ignored the emotional distance growing wider every month, and I kept sending the money, because as long as I was giving, I could still believe I was needed. But deep down, I was starting to wonder something I didn't dare say out loud. If I stopped, would anything about me still matter to them at all? The day everything changed didn't feel dramatic at first. It felt ordinary, almost too ordinary. I remember waking up early that morning, checking my emails the way I always did, expecting the usual routine. Work updates, deadlines, reminders of responsibilities I had built my life around. I was already thinking about the month ahead, calculating dates in my mind as I always did, making sure the $2,800 transfer would go through smoothly. But instead of normal work messages, there was something different. A short subject line, a meeting notice. Then another email, then another. By the time I opened the third one, I already knew something was wrong. The company restructuring wasn't something I had expected, even though I probably should have. People talked about changes for weeks, but I never imagined I would be part of them. I had always been the reliable one, the consistent one, the one who stayed late and solved problems without complaint. But none of that mattered in the end. The decision was final. My position was gone. At first, my mind refused to process it. I sat there staring at the screen, reading the same lines again and again, as if repetition could change the meaning. It didn't feel real. It felt like a mistake someone would correct in the next email, but no correction came. Just silence, and suddenly, everything I had structured my life around began to tilt. The first thought that came wasn't about myself. It was about my family, the $2,800. My chest tightened as I realized what this meant. For 11 years, without interruption, that money had gone home like clockwork. It wasn't just a transfer anymore. It was an expectation woven into the rhythm of their lives, and now I had nothing. I remember sitting there for a long time, unable to move. My phone was still in my hand. My mind kept going back and forth between disbelief and panic. What do I say? How do I explain this? Will they understand? I didn't even think about asking for help at first. I just wanted emotional support, someone to say it's going to be okay, someone to remind me I wasn't alone. So I called my mother. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. I texted instead, keeping it simple. I need to talk, it's important. Then I waited, minutes passed, then an hour, no response. I told myself maybe she was busy. Maybe she hadn't seen it. So I tried my father next, then my sister-in-law, one by one, no replies. At first, it felt like coincidence, but coincidence doesn't stretch for hours. I called again later in the day. Still nothing. That silence started to feel different, heavier, not accidental, intentional. By evening, I tried again, this time with more urgency. I didn't even know what I expected anymore: comfort, concern, anything, but what I got was nothing. Just silence stretching across every attempt to reach them. It was strange how quickly silence can replace years of conversation. I sat in my room, phone in my hand, replaying every sacrifice I had made. Every month, every transfer, every moment I chose them over myself. And now, in the moment I needed them even slightly, there was nothing. No, what happened? No, are you okay? Not even a simple acknowledgement, just absence. I remember opening my banking app out of habit later that night. Not to send money, but because my fingers still moved automatically, like muscle memory refusing to accept reality. For the first time in 11 years, there was no transfer planned, and yet the world didn't collapse. Nothing changed on their side. That realization hit harder than the job loss itself. Life there continued without interruption. Without me, the thought sat in my chest like something sharp. Had I been supporting them, or had I just been maintaining their comfort? The difference suddenly felt enormous. Over the next few days, I kept trying, messages, calls, voicemails I didn't even know what to say in anymore. But the response never came. It wasn't anger from their side. It wasn't explanation. It was simply nothing. And nothing is more painful than rejection you can't even confirm, because rejection at least acknowledges your existence. Silence erases it. Slowly, painfully, I began to understand something I had avoided for years. My presence in their lives had become conditional. Not emotional, not familial, financial, and now that the condition was gone, so was the connection. I didn't cry at first, shock doesn't allow it, but later that night, sitting alone in a quiet room that suddenly felt too big, it all came crashing in. Not just the job loss, not just the silence, but the realization that I had built 11 years of loyalty on a foundation that never truly saw me beyond what I could provide. And in that moment, for the first time, I wasn't just unemployed. I was unwanted in the only way that mattered most. The silence didn't break. It settled, and after a while, I stopped expecting it to change. At first, I kept checking my phone out of habit. Not because I believed there would be a message, but because my fingers hadn't learned a new pattern yet. Every notification sound made my heart jump for a second before reality corrected it. Nothing, no calls. No messages, no what happened, no are you okay. Just a quiet emptiness where 11 years of connection used to live. Days turned into a strange routine of waiting that never ended. I started noticing things I had ignored before, not about them, but about myself. My life outside that $2,800 transfer was almost unfamiliar. I had built everything around a cycle that no longer existed. For the first time, I wasn't sending anything, and the world didn't respond. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly breaking free. I remember sitting one evening near the window, watching the street below. People were walking, laughing, carrying groceries, living lives that didn't depend on whether someone acknowledged their existence or not. It felt foreign to me, like I had been standing outside that normal world for a long time without realizing it. For 11 years, I thought I was holding my family together, but now I was starting to understand something uncomfortable. I wasn't holding them together, I was holding them up, and they never questioned whether I was okay doing it. The hardest part wasn't the job loss anymore. It was the realization that my absence didn't create the reaction I expected. I had imagined confusion, concern, at least a single call asking what went wrong, but reality gave me nothing. And somehow, that nothing was louder than anything they could have said. One night, I finally opened old messages. I don't know why. Maybe I needed proof that what I felt wasn't imagined. I scrolled through years of conversations, short replies, financial updates, occasional greetings. So many of them revolved around money without directly saying it, not demands, just expectations hidden behind familiarity. Things are a bit tight this month. We were thinking of fixing the kitchen. You'll manage, right? I used to read those lines as normal family communication. Now they felt different, heavier, like instructions I had been following without realizing I had a choice. And the most painful realization wasn't that I was used. It was that I allowed myself to become necessary in a way that erased my own boundaries. I had confused responsibility with obligation, and love with compliance. Slowly, something in me began to settle, not anger, not bitterness, but clarity. For the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to explain my worth to anyone, because the silence had already done it for me. If 11 years of consistency could disappear into nothing the moment I stopped providing, then maybe I had been measuring value in the wrong direction all along. I stopped calling, not out of revenge, not to prove a point, but because I finally understood that reaching out to a place that refuses to reach back is just another form of self-abandonment. Instead, I started rebuilding small things, a routine, a walk in the morning, simple meals without guilt, applications for new work, even when doubt sat heavily in the background. It wasn't fast. It wasn't inspiring in the way people like to describe recovery. It was slow, awkward, uncertain, but it was mine, and for the first time in years that word mine didn't feel temporary. Still, there were moments when the past tried to pull me back, a memory of my mother's voice, a familiar habit of calculating what they might need, a reflex to check my bank balance and think in terms of what I could send, but each time I stopped myself. Not because I stopped caring, but because I finally started caring about myself in a way that wasn't conditional. Weeks later, I received a message, just one, short, neutral, not asking how I was, not acknowledging the silence. Just a simple line about hope everything is fine. No apology, no explanation, just distance pretending to be connection. I stared at it for a long time before replying, and then I didn't, not out of anger, but because I realized something important. The version of me that would have immediately responded was the same version that had spent 11 years disappearing quietly for everyone else's comfort. And I wasn't that person anymore. That night, I deleted old chats, not to erase the past, but to stop reopening wounds that no longer needed answers. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be chosen. I was choosing myself. And in that quiet decision, no confrontation, no revenge, no dramatic ending, I finally understood what real revenge looked like. It wasn't anger, it wasn't shouting, it wasn't proving anything to people who had already decided not to see you. It was simply this, living a life that no longer requires their permission.